evening. My name is Jamilah Lemieux, and welcome to The Kids Are Asleep, our weekly late night, late-ish evening chat show where we talk about things related to parenting, sort of. We talk about our kids a little bit, and people who are parents, people who are not parents, people who are parent adjacent, come together for a little breather in the midst of all the chaos. However, this week is going to be a little bit different. For one, I do not have a cocktail. I am drinking today. I'm having a little peppermint tea in my favorite mug, which was made by the Fire Next Time Ceramics, dope Black-owned ceramics company from my hometown of Chicago. But we are actually recording this on Thursday morning, which is why I have on glasses so you can't see how rough and wore out I look right about now. I'll clue you in on a little secret. Light skin black absolutely does crack, and I'm doing the best that I can right about now, but it's a pandemic and showing a little wear and tear here. But the reason that I'm here bright and early on Thursday morning and recording this for you to consume on Thursday evening is because we have a very special guest who couldn't join us tonight, and we're going to have a really important and hopefully enlightening conversation about something that has been an issue of great importance for a very long time, obviously, but has come front and center this week. We're talking about reproductive justice. That is an issue that is central to my heart, very dear to my heart. I am a Black woman. I am a mother. I am a friend to women who have had to make a lot of difficult decisions about motherhood. I've had to make two decisions myself, one very easy one, to not have a second child, and a difficult decision to have the beautiful, wonderful child that you all know and love as Mini Mila. But obviously, our right to make that decision has been under constant attack. There is no time in my life where I have not heard the words Roe v. Wade, heard debate over the appropriateness of people like myself having the ability to make choices about parenthood. And with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, this is going to be a topic that we're talking about for a very long time. And it's emotional and complicated for me in so many ways, because I took for granted that we would not be debating Roe v. Wade when I was a woman well into her 30s, but I didn't realize, as I'd hoped by this point in my life, that the danger that we face in terms of having access to safe and legal abortion. And there are people, of course, in this country who do not have access to safe and legal abortion. But I didn't think that we would be here at this point. So with no further ado, I'm going to spare you the cute anecdote about my daughter. Maybe we'll get into her a little bit later in the show. I'd like to bring in our guest, Melanie Roussell Newman, the Senior Vice President of Communications and Culture for Planned Parenthood, Federation of America, and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamilah. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. And I think before we get started, we're having a little t-shirt moment. We had some synergy when we were getting dressed today. Can I see the rest of the shirt?
Yes.
Very nice.
I woke up and felt the need to make a statement. My t-shirt and also my phone felt the need to make an alarm statement right at this moment. This is a parenting moment. That alarm is a reminder for my child's 2:00 virtual class so that I don't miss it. He's not here because I wanted to record this podcast, but I put my phone in the other room. So I'll be right back. This is real mom life happening.
Real mom life happening. Look, this is a real mom life show. I live a very real mom life. So while we wait for Melanie to come back, I will share a little Naima anecdote from the other day. Oh, that was quick. I was going to say, I usually start the show off with a monologue and I talk about my daughter, and I didn't do it this time. I said, while you're gone, I'll share a little anecdote. So I'll share it anyway. My daughter is incredibly dramatic. And I was going to mention that anyway in relation to her response to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. But she's just in general, she's an Aries. She's just full of theater. And I was telling her a kind of sad childhood story not too long ago. I can't remember what it was, but something that, memory came up from something we were watching on television. And I was like, and I realized I've been talking for a minute. I said, I'm sorry to kind of bring the mood down. I know that's kind of a sad story. It's just something I hadn't thought about in a really long time. And she said, yeah, you know what's a sad thing I had to go through? I can't find the remote. This is 7. By the way, here's a preview because you have little people, right? How old are your
I have
little
a little person. My child Malcolm is 3, almost 4. He will be 4 in October 9th. And he is also very dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
He FaceTimes with my mom every single day. That's his dinner routine. He calls her Gaga. He says, I have to talk to Gaga. And they catch up on his day and her day. And the other day he said, Gaga, I had such a bad day at school. It's not school. He's in a pod at somebody's house, but I had a bad day today. And she said, why, baby? He said, I just get so wild. I get so wild sometimes because I'm so frustrated.
Oh.
And she said, what do you mean you're frustrated? He said, I get frustrated. I don't know, Gaga. I'm thankful to have a child who has the emotional intelligence to be able to express how he feels and to be able to attach words and emotions to those feelings. He doesn't do it all the time. Sometimes he just screams and cries or throws things because he's 3, almost 4. But he is very dramatic, very expressive, but the love of my life as well. And one of the few things getting me through this pandemic. It is both a blessing and a curse. I get hugs and cuddles in the middle of the day when I want them, but I also get punched. So
Yes. That is a metaphor. Parenting in general, Melanie. You get hugs and cuddles when you want to, at least for the first year, and then you get punched. How have you been able to survive working from home with your little one? I take it you're primarily working from home office at this point?
I have been home for 6 months we've been doing this since the last time I was in the office was March 13th. So my husband and I both will work from home. I'm sitting in the dining room. That's my office. I have no doors. I had to send him a very stern email earlier today that says, I will be recording a live podcast. Please plan to eat lunch upstairs and do not come down the stairs yelling my name. And usually for the first, I don't know, up until 3 weeks ago, it was the 3 of us home all day. And my child was doing virtual daycare, which sounds crazy, but his daycare stood up very quickly, a robust virtual program that included 3 or 4 sessions of 30 minutes each a day. And he was used to that and he was into it. And then he's now in pre-K 3 in DC public schools. He is still getting several small chunk virtual sessions a day. But at the point that I realized DCPS was going to be all virtual, I didn't feel like having him home all day was going to continue to be sustainable. So some friends and I got together and we set up a little pod. There are 4 kids in the pod. He goes to a girlfriend's house every day, 5 days a week, but for half days. So he eats lunch, he takes a nap, or he mostly does not nap. He goes in his room and sings or whatever. I don't care. He just has to stay in that room. And then we have a couple of hours after that. It's more manageable, but it's still too much. I shouldn't have to do this. How I feel that I have to do this.
Yeah. And that's something that I think a lot of us have been saying to ourselves constantly. 1, this is too much. And 2, I shouldn't have to do this. Fair. And I think I had a conversation with a friend last night. There's a certain amount of guilt that I feel over just the relative privilege I have that I'm able to work. I worked from home before the pandemic, so it changed the way that I work in a lot of ways, but that I had the comfort of staying home, that I was able to keep, we've been able to keep our daughter in, my household and her dad's household. Nobody had to physically leave, the house to work. And even with that, I'm like, my life has been taken away from me in nearly every imaginable way. My routines are gone. The things that I did for joy and pleasure, many of them are gone. My daughter's connection to her friends is gone. It's a rough time. And, we say too much. It's not, of course, just the pandemic. It's not just the racial uprisings and police violence. There's so many things that we're balancing at once. And, I often think, if I'm stressed out right now, if I'm tired, I think about my folks that are working in certain spaces and people who are working in the reproductive justice world right now. As you always are constantly on high alert and you're constantly doing battle to protect that which should not have to be protected. But right now, of course, it's become a devastatingly challenging time following the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Let's just get straight into it. What are you feeling in this moment? Are you optimistic? Because abortion, there are a lot of people that are single voters on both sides of the abortion issue. And on the right, there are people that will abandon, anything that makes sense in terms of their actual lives, right? So voting against measures that would keep food on their tables, that would make their communities, safer, that would ensure that farmers have the resources that they need and that businesses are given the funds that they need to rebuild after a time like this. We'll put all of that aside. The guy who's going to put another conservative or another two conservatives on the Supreme Court. How are you feeling?
So I exist in the world as a Black woman every day, and so the what's going on in the world feels incredibly heavy because yes, I work for Planned Parenthood and our reproductive rights and freedom are on the line for sure. But this court, the Supreme Court, has been the backstop for civil and human rights for, I don't know, the last 60 years, 80 years. Well, I'll go back to Brown versus Board of Education, right? It's the backstop. It is where our freedom has been affirmed, and our freedom to exist, to have autonomy over our bodies and our lives. And that autonomy over our bodies and our lives isn't just reproductive freedom. It is it's racial justice, it's economic justice, it's environmental justice. The freedom to exist in our bodies crosses all issues in such a way, which is why you see movements becoming much more intersectional now, because that core right to exist is drives each of those issue areas. My right to exist at work, my right to exist in a clean environment, my right to exist in healthcare, my right to exist and make decisions for my own body, my right to exist and receive fair treatment by law enforcement and a criminal justice system. All of those things are on the line, and I am incredibly anxious. I don't know another way to put it. I'm anxious about the world that my child is, my Black son is going to live in. I'm anxious about what we are going to allow, we, the people of this country, are going to allow going forward. How far is this dictator going to take us before somebody, Planned Parenthood is fighting every single, the Planned Parenthood Action Fund is fighting every single day, obviously, but there's a lawlessness to government right now that is a little unbelievable in 2020, frankly. And so Justice Ginsburg's death is just another moment in this path to, it feels like we are really in a life or death situation in so many ways. And Justice Ginsburg's death is another moment that is driving us toward, in my opinion, life or death. As it relates to the cases before the court is set to hear an ACA case just that and later in October, and so.
And what's an NCA case?
I'm sorry.
You said an NCA case?
An Affordable Care Act case, an ACA case.
Oh, ACA.
It's a case.
NCA.
I'm sorry. It's a case about the Affordable Care Act and whether the Affordable Care Act can stand, and whether we will go forward with pregnancy as a pre-existing condition, for example, whether millions of people will get to stay on their health care or not. And right behind that, there are 17 cases impacting abortion access in this case that are one step away from the Supreme Court, including the egregious six-week bill out of Georgia that would prevent or ban abortion before many women know they're pregnant. We are marching toward this moment where our rights and freedoms are on the line, and for me as a Black woman, again, I feel it across. My right to exist is on the line, and so that's. I think the question was, how do I feel? I'm nervous, anxious. I don't want to be too emotional or dramatic about it, but it's now is the time.
And these are emotional and dramatic times. I think that because we are unlearning, I think many of us, decorum and the way that we've been taught it, that spaces like this, that politics is not a place for emotion or for feelings, right? But other entities and institutions have brought their emotions and their feelings and their religious texts into this space. Mm-hmm. I think those of us that are on, various parts of the left are so fearful of showing that level of our humanity, and I think it's been to our detriment. I don't want to make this entirely a conversation about abortion. As you mentioned with the Affordable Care Act and pregnancy as a pre-existing condition, that there's so much on the line that should not be. Like, we should not be in a situation where an 87-year-old heartbeat is what's keeping, anything afloat, right? And in a nation of millions. Like, there's something that's wrong with the Constitution that we're arguing over the ability of it to be followed or not. There's just something, it's entirely possible that the people who founded this nation didn't have a vision that would make sense in 2020, right? And so the vulnerability of the nation at the hands of the Supreme Court, I think, is a prime example of that. But the reason I have been thinking about abortion a lot this week, not just because obviously the challenges that are going to be put in front of potentially a conservative court, but how the right has galvanized its base historically over the issue of abortion, despite it not having personal relevance in the lives of people who morally oppose it, right? If you choose to not do this, this is not the right decision for me, this is not the right decision for my family, we can opt out of it. We can not talk about abortion on Sunday at dinner. We can just not deal with it, right? Mm-hmm. There are things we have to deal with. There are our bills, there's our health, there's our ability to, send our children to a good school and purchase land and all of these things that are impacted, that will impact our lives that we can focus on. But there are people who feel that they have a moral obligation to protect what they believe to be unborn babies, right? This is the fight of our lives. The left has never successfully convinced the masses that there's a moral obligation to protect the right to safe and legal abortion. And I think specifically about Black women who make up a significant percentage of the people who are seeking abortions. But when the conversations about abortions in our communities, in our churches, in our households, in our friend circles, our sister circles are so often still dishonest, that this is something that has to be clouded in secrecy, that if it's done at all, we're not to talk about it, or that it's a source of deep shame or great regret, or that there must be this amount of hand wringing, that this is the worst decision a woman could ever have to make. It's the most difficult decision, so often, right, we hear abortion described as the most difficult decision that a woman's ever going to have to make, when we know that that's not necessarily true in all, or arguably even in most instances, right? That there are so often times where it's simply, I do not wish to be a parent. Most people who are seeking abortions already have children, so they decided that they either do not want to add to their family at all or at that time. There are medical reasons that people are seeking abortions, but abortion remains a dirty word while we fight tooth and nail to protect it. Do you think that this is a moment in which we can or should open up the conversation about abortion in a meaningful way, and not find ourselves, saying it's the smallest part of this moment. It's not it's not the majority of what Planned Parenthood does, or it's not, something people want to do, but they should be able to do this horrible thing. Do you think we can rebrand abortion now?
So we last year released a documentary called Ours to Tell, and it's the story of four people who have had abortions. It's a 17-minute short, and I encourage people to check it out. It's at ourstotell.org. And the goal of it is to reframe how people think about abortion. It starts with each of the people telling the story of their lives today, which is the way people are living in their lives today, made possible by the ability to make that decision for themselves. And so in at least a couple instances, one woman you see getting her kids ready for school, another woman you see taking her dog for a walk, and later decorating a Christmas tree with her kids. Another woman you see having dinner with her partner. There's a trans man who is in a relationship and talking about the excitement of celebrating the holidays with his partner. These are stories that exist because people had agency and ability and access to make a decision for themselves. It is how, and the goal of it is to open up that conversation about why, not even why someone might want an abortion, but the fact that people have abortions, and it helps them live full lives by having that ability to make a decision for themselves. And when I think about the stigma that is attached to abortion, that stigma is attached to everything about womanhood. Womanhood is stigmatized. Periods are stigmatized. Nobody wants to. When I had my son and I went back to work, I was starting a new job, and 3 weeks into the job, I went on a retreat. And it was my first time traveling and pumping. And it was very difficult. And it was all I could talk about, because I just could not believe how hard it was to travel with all this equipment and having to pump all this milk for this baby, and the logistics of it. Like, motherhood is like, what's the shipping company? We're logistics. That's what motherhood is. And I'm not that most organized person, but I had to sketch out how much milk he needed before I left and make sure I had enough frozen. And I'm going back and I'm talking about it. My coworker was like, "Would you just stop saying the word breast milk?" Why? That's how I feed my child. It comes out of my breast. It's totally normal. And I would encourage you to go home and tell your wife that you don't like hearing the word breast milk, and see how that works out for you at home. Everything about womanhood is stigmatized. Periods, breast milk, motherhood, abortion, fibroids, miscarriages. We are trained not to talk about our womanhood.
Absolutely.
And it's dangerous. It's dangerous.
If fibroids impact, I'm sorry, I hope I didn't cut you off, but if fibroids impacted Black men in the way that they impact Black women,
girl,
there's not a Black woman who could not tell you 5 things you need to know about fibroids, right? That would be part of our duty, whether we were married, single, queer, straight, like that. We must deal with the catastrophic tragedy that is fibroids, because it's killing our men, and yeah, I doubt the average
Ask a man what a fibroid is. Ask a Black man what a fibroid is. I am in the middle of binging Girlfriends and reliving my 20s right now, and they had a whole narrative. Have you gotten to the narrative arc with Maya and her fibroids?
No, I haven't.
I totally forgot about this. They did an entire narrative arc, which feels revolutionary that happened 20 years ago, and we're still at a place where people don't talk about it.
We're still here. My mother had a hysterectomy when she was 50, so I knew about fibroids because it was such a, big deal in our household. And I had a girlfriend who luckily did not have to have a hysterectomy because she doesn't have children yet and she wants to, but she had had to deal with a very, very, very rough bout of them that changed her life and her sex life in ways that, the rest of us couldn't connect with. And this started when we were in our late 20s. But the majority of the women I know who've been told by a doctor that they have fibroids have been told, and I don't want to get all the way, off what we were talking about, but this is such an under-discussed thing, and because I know
it really is.
Most of the women I know, and at one point I've been told by a different doctor, I've been told that I had them, I was told I didn't, then I was told that I did, but they were very small, and the two doctors that said that I had them both said it's no big deal. We'll just keep an eye on them. There was no serious recommendation around diet, exercise, nothing. And I'm the child of somebody who's had them to the point where they thought I was a twin. That's how big my mother's fibroids were. They thought this was the 80s, so they thought I was a twin. They didn't think she could have children. When she had me, the first thing they saw were, this huge fibroid. So she ends up having her uterus removed. And so the idea that doctors are just telling Black women it's no big deal, or not even checking for them at all, or talking to us about them.
So it was a big deal in my household too. My mom, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go on.
My mom found out she was pregnant with me in pre-op for a hysterectomy because of fibroids. She had 3 miscarriages between me and my brother. We are 13. My brothers are 16 and 13 years older than me. And she was 40 when she had me. Thought she couldn't have kids anymore. I think the last miscarriage was a year before I was born, and she didn't want to try anymore and also didn't want to have the pain of miscarriage again. And so she was going to go forward with this hysterectomy and found out in pre-op that she was pregnant, and told me as an adult that she was going to have an abortion. And she had really wanted a big family, and it wasn't that she didn't want to have another child. She didn't think she could. And the doctor said, why don't you see what happens? And, I'm here. And she actually never had a hysterectomy and never had a problem with her fibroids again.
Wow.
But she talked about that my whole life. So as soon as all through my adulthood, I had this deep-seated fear of fibroids impacting pregnancy. I do have 2 very small fibroids, but I get them checked all the time. And I have a doctor who respects me and knows if I say I'm worried about something, he'll do that ultrasound anytime I want, which I know is not a common experience for Black women, but that's why he's been my doctor since I was 22, because he listened to me. But my mother talking about those miscarriages, talking about fibroids, it was never stigmatized for me. It wasn't until I started having conversations with girlfriends that I realized other people didn't openly talk about it.
Absolutely. I was surprised to learn that too, because I assume, because I saw, and my mother's a part of the Black Women's Health Project, the research project that Harvard's been doing for many years. So seeing the surveys and things come in the house and her talking about her experiences with fibroids and, seeing Essence magazine in the house, I was aware of it. So I just assumed that, all of my girls and their moms were having these conversations, and, some of them were and some of them weren't. It's interesting because we often talk about how men don't go to the doctor as often as they should, and every time I hear someone saying we got to get our Black men going to the doctor, I'm like, we absolutely do. We also have to talk about what happens when Black people go to the doctor, right? And Black women in particular who are more likely to keep up with our doctor's appointments, to be proactive, to say something's not right, I'm going to get this checked up. When we get there, we're not heard, right? We're not taken seriously. We need to have a higher pain threshold, et cetera, et cetera. Something that I mean, not being heard, I should say, is a recurrent theme in the lives of Black women. Certainly, in all of the professional spaces in which I've worked, I've come across situations, regardless of who was in power, if they looked like me, if they didn't, some space, some room where Black women's voices were being, if not intentionally silenced by somebody who was just wholly incapable of hearing them. And there was a story that came out a few months ago by BuzzFeed that spoke to Black women who worked in a number of reproductive health and justice organizations, including Planned Parenthood, where former and current Black women employees talked about not feeling heard. So I'm curious to hear from you, who you've been with Planned Parenthood since last year, and you came from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which is another phenomenal organization, to step into this legacy brand, right? Because Planned Parenthood is so much more than a health center, than an activist group, right? It is a cornerstone of women's rights women's access to healthcare in so many ways, and it plays this important role for people of all gender expressions, right? Regardless of the politics around it, we know that for so many people, Planned Parenthood is the only step to healthcare, which means getting those life-saving breast checks. That means getting access to STI screenings. And again, in a lot of cases, it's being the only doctor that somebody may see for a year or until there is another concern. As somebody who has done a lot of stuff with Planned Parenthood, and I've come in and spoke with employees, and I keynoted the national convention some years ago, and have done panels and stuff. I've always been very proud to support the work of Planned Parenthood. I've had a number of good friends, including some folks who were quoted in that article, and people that I admire who've worked with you all. I'm curious to know how you're feeling about stepping into that space at a moment that feels like it should be the perfect opportunity, because we're having this racial reckoning, and folks are saying Black Lives Matter, and they stand with us, and they want to support us. And there's a great opportunity to really center Black women's voices and to amplify the great work you all have been doing around engaging Black women and keeping Black women a part of a movement that is the product of our labor, right? Because you don't have a reproductive health movement without Black women. But in the way that you had to step aside and catch your phone alarm a second ago, I realized that my computer's going to die if I don't get the battery. So if you want to get started on that, I'll hear you, but you won't see me.
Yeah, no, I'll get started. I came, as you mentioned, I came to Parenthood from LDF, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and it's not my first experience with Planned Parenthood was in Tallahassee, Florida. Shout out to FAMU strike, Rattler strike. I went to Planned Parenthood to get birth control in college, and that was my access to reproductive health care when I was in college. And since that time, I have supported Planned Parenthood. I've had friends who worked at Planned Parenthood over the years. But I had never worked in healthcare or repro. I had worked in racial justice, and I'd worked mostly in government and campaigns. I came to the organization when I left the administration, the Obama administration. I sort of set a framework for what I wanted to do with my life. And what I want to do with my life is impact and improve the lives of Black people, period, hard stop. And so I seek out opportunities that will help allow me to do that. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund is one of the most impactful organizations in Black people's lives, responsible for Brown v. Board of Education and years of court cases that have expanded freedom for Black people in this country. Coming to Planned Parenthood was an interesting decision because while from the outside, my perception was that Planned Parenthood's patient base is very diverse, but that diversity didn't carry over into how Planned Parenthood showed up in the world. That was my outside perception. And I wanted to be a part of changing that, of driving that change. And being a Black woman in leadership at Planned Parenthood, I thought would allow me to do that and to help center those voices. I said that very clearly in my interview process, that my goal, how I want to use my professional life, is to improve the lives of Black people, and my goal as a communicator will be to center voices of color, and I got this job. And my professional experience, I think, with the exception of LDF, which is a Black-led his legacy civil rights organization, my professional experience, I think, like you mentioned, is that showing up in as a Black person in the professional world is always, there are always challenges. There are microaggressions. I think the challenge with organizations, legacy, progressive, social justice organizations like Planned Parenthood and others, because I don't think the stories that were told in BuzzFeed, I don't think are unique to organizations like Planned Parenthood. It's a 100-year-old organization that is steeped in white supremacy. That is true. But it does not make Planned Parenthood separate. I think the challenge is, are we going to be who we say we are? And I do think in this moment, we have an obligation to be who we say we are, and to really center those voices, and to really hear people when they say, that's not right. I am experiencing something that is inconsistent with who we say we are. And I think Alexis McGill Johnson, the president and CEO of PPFA and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, happens to also be an expert in racial bias and founded the Perception Institute, which has helped a number of organizations, corporate and nonprofit, work their way through becoming really institutionalizing inclusivity and belonging and driving that from the inside. And so I think we are fortunate to be under her leadership at this time. I am personally fortunate to be working with her, learning from her, growing with her in this role. And I think we have a lot of work to do. We've been very candid about that. We've been very public about the work that we have to do as an organization. Even before the BuzzFeed article ran, we've been very public about the need to address systemic racism from top to bottom within Planned Parenthood, to improve experiences for Black and Brown patients in Planned Parenthood health centers, to improve experiences for Black and Brown staff and employees, and to really commit to being an anti-racist organization. And so I think Alexis, following that article, said publicly on Twitter that she appreciated the staff who have called us out and called us in, and hears them, sees them. I hear them, I see them, I feel them. We have a lot of work to do, and I think we are working every day to be who we say we are.
Well, Melanie, it's been so great talking to you, and I'm really looking forward to all that you are going to continue to do with Planned Parenthood. And this is going to be a fight, and just know that you have folks that are with you and cheering you on, and are down to go as many rounds as it takes with you guys. Before we get out of here, there's a little game that we play. The name of the game changes each week, but it's the same game. So this week we're going to call it One Question. And so my daughter, I'm sure your little person has a habit of doing this at 3, almost 4 years old. You right? You said 3, almost 4, or just turned 4?
Yeah, 3, almost 4. Mm-hmm.
Okay, 3, almost 4. So my daughter waits until the most inopportune time to ask me a real quick question or just something real quick. So it's like, hey, can you play this game with us? I'm like, we've got 5 minutes before we have to leave the house. Okay, well, can we play this game real quick? Or can we completely change my outfit? Or can you explain to me how the sun hangs in the sky without falling down? But it's like, but we have 2 minutes before our Uber arrives. So I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock. And I'm going to ask you as many questions as you can get through real quick. Okay. And so these are, I'm asking as a 3, almost 4-year-old. Okay.
Oh gosh. Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. What does Planned Parenthood do? What is your job?
Planned Parenthood is an organization that Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Girl, elevator pitch. That's my job. My job is to know the elevator pitch and to say it. Planned Parenthood Federation of America supports.
This is the 3-year-old version, though. I'm 3, so.
Yeah. Baby, my job is to speak on behalf of, for a 3-year-old. I feel like he actually just asked me this last week. I'm not gonna do it in 60 seconds. He just asked me, what is PPFA? What does that mean? And I said, it means Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And he said, what do they do? And I said, well, baby, Planned Parenthood health centers provide health care to all people who need health care for their bodies. And he said, what is health care? And I said, when we go to the doctor, and mommy takes you to the doctor and you get well. Something like that.
That's it. And you just went over by 2 seconds. So that's it, right? You gotta make it so that try to make it so that everyone can go to the doctor.
I went over by 2 seconds because I had to get my elevator pitch right in my head, but I got there. Thank you.
You made it. Now you're ready for them.
Now I'm ready for it. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a great conversation. I appreciate the tea. I have my tea in I'm going to shout it out one more time. Florida A&M University mug.
Shout out to FAMU. All HBCU love on my end. I went one of the other ones.
Yeah.
A little school called Howard that I'm sure has a place in your heart because I believe you're a member of Delta Sigma Theta.
I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta. Delta in my heart. My brother went to Howard. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, it's been wonderful having you here, Melanie. Hopefully we'll have you back and just keep us posted on everything you're doing and how we can be supportive. Thank you, viewers, for watching, and we will be back next week for another great edition of The Kids Are Asleep. Take care.